minister, mayor. You know, he baptized my kids, both of them, and I respect that. But at the same time, the social movement can't be denied, and it's taking place. And, you know, so we must find that medium where we can, as you say, get some understanding. We don't want chaos in the street, but the revolution is being televised.
I hear you. I hear you.
I understand your current executive position as mayor. I respect that you've served your state for numerous years, as well as your parish. And we certainly applaud that, but we also have empathy for you, because in this position that you currently occupy, pardon the pun, we understand that you are under pressure, political pressure, and that we have this very right-wing party, which, although its ideologies and policies and proposals and analyses have been discredited by the world, as evidenced by this global Occupy movement, it's still there. And so we would like for you to take a stand. Take a stand and show that you really stand for human rights. I'm not talking about this limited document of the Constitution. I'm talking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which looks at human rights in 5 dimensions: cultural rights, social rights, economic rights, civil rights, and political rights. And I think if you do value these public spaces and the need for us to be able to dialogue and dissent in those public spaces at all times, if you recognize the need for the public sphere and the need to defend that, and if you really want to make Richmond a safe space for democracy, we would like to see more. But at the same time, we recognize that you are limited, you are constrained. And as students of Howard's Inn and Dr. King, we are going to take to the streets whether or not we get City Council's approval. We will have to, because that's the only way that change will actually
Well, I
come.
certainly understand that. I think that you may not choose to work at change the way I choose to work at change. And I may not choose to work at change the way you choose to work at change. But if we're all working at it together, maybe change will take place. And so I'm working at change through constraints of government, which is difficult. It's bureaucratic. But it's the hand that we have been dealt, because this is the system that is in place. And it would seem to me that you would be comforted in knowing that there's somebody in government that is trying to make these wheels turn, even though they turn ever so slowly. But as you agitate and protest and so forth and so on, then there's a way that those things kind of come together. And there is a tangential kind of overlap where there are common interests. Okay? Yes?
You stated you were a child of the civil rights, not being born but being a participant.
Right.
And that we should feel encouraged by the fact that we have someone with that background in office. And at one point I was. But I feel the civil rights movement, and correct me if I'm wrong because I wasn't around at the time, was made up of peaceful movements and demonstrations. And you had sit-ins where you overtook establishments and sat, preventing not only people to walk through just socially, but affecting them financially as well. And you were met with unwarranted and violent police brutality. And I felt, as with someone with that background in office, there would be, I don't want to say sympathy, but you've been there. And I feel like the way you act doesn't support your background for me to truly appreciate what you've been through. Because at some point along this line, our basic birthright got confused with privileges. And I feel as if it's causing this imbalance that just shouldn't be. And if you truly took anything away from the civil rights movement, which I appreciate to this day, and it's part of the reason why I personally occupy now, because I know this isn't just for me, This is for when I'm long and gone and people that come
That's
after
right.
me as well.
That's true.
And I would like that cycle to be broken between peaceful protesters and peaceful movements and our relationship with our legislation and with our police force. And I don't feel like that's being done here. I feel like it's being talked about and it sounds nice. And I understand to a certain degree your hands are tied, but I also feel like some things are done extremely in excess and sometimes out of intimidation. And that's not a place either one of us wants to be, because that's not what I personally stand for. I don't feel like that's what the group stands for, because we haven't been extremely peaceful even in the wake of violence. And I feel like that's something to consider with your background, sir.
And we will remain nonviolent.
Of course.
No matter how much violence we meet.
Appreciating everything that's been said, and also appreciating your office as a pastor. I'm also a student of theology by way of my education at Oakwood Seventh-day Adventist University. What I have taken away from my studies, my biblical studies, if I may, is that, and I'm not indicting you and saying that you or your colleagues think this way, but we understand that caring is not a business, it's an obligation based upon the empathy toward the human condition. And the First Amendment allows us, as we peaceably assemble, and as we collectively and consensually agree on the, if you will, best ways to deal with these particular problems, that it empowers us as a legitimate governing body, or it would not say that we would have the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. So in this legitimacy, I think what Q is saying is that we are attempting to dissolve those legislative and social boundaries that prevent us from actually cohering on a lot of the issues that we do share. I've had many opportunities to watch you preach, and I am very impressed at your wealth of knowledge theologically, your genuine pastoral care that I see, and I appeal to that because one of my idols, Christ, was a man who dealt with a person's temporal needs initially. He just simply cared about the person rather than their issues, and I think that, as I said before, as we continue to dialogue and meet and discuss these certain issues, for us to find a better way to dissolve those barriers that prevent us from working together cohesively, that prevent us from actually taking instruction and guidance. Because I have no problem other than the fact that it seems to me, and I was detained by the Richmond Police Department, held without bond, for simply peaceably assembling with my brothers and sisters, not tooting my horn while walking around the camp, reminding the officers and ourselves that we are a non-violent, non-resistant movement, and we will comply in every way, because I believe this compliance allows us not only the opportunity to express that we can obey the law, but we can also be a law within ourselves and also work within the boundaries of it. So that's the strength, I think, that as an individual member of Occupy Richmond, that we bring within our collective.
Well, I hope we can continue these discussions, and I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off.
I was going to say, we do have a way that you can lend us a hand that is well within your power. We would love it if you would lend your active and vocal support to an interpretation of that law that would facilitate our being able to encamp at a public space, utilize an encampment as a pure symbolic form of freedom of speech. If perhaps you would lend us your active and vocal support through maybe issuing a statement or supporting us at City Council, this might tip the scales in our favor for other people to recognize that what we are doing is a foundational, fundamental liberty, and that it is a prerequisite for us to address those social ills that we all want to see done away with. It's a prerequisite for us to be able to gather a community around us and educate ourselves before we try to address these problems that generations of legislatures and governmental agencies have been completely ineffectual in dealing with. So
That's something we can consider. And I would conclude by saying that I've enjoyed talking to you. It's very good talking to you. Obviously, you've given a lot of thought to your positions and your stances, obviously you're very committed to what you're doing, and that's admirable. I don't want you to lose sight of the fact that we need, in order to change any of these ordinances, you need to have city council, 5 people on city council to do that. And I also would like to suggest, as Q said, provide guidance. Don't allow yourselves to be used by entities that do not have your values for their own political gain, and allow you to become pitted against, or allow you to become ploys in political plots that pit people against each other, and at the end of the day, do not foster your mission. Okay.
I would like to thank you and you all
Yes.
for,
Yes, thank you.
dialoguing and conversating with us, making this possible. And I, for one, look forward to this continuing. We don't know how the GA will do as far as additions to, some of our faces might not appear again, but the issues will remain the same. And hopefully we'll continue to go forward. I feel good and I appreciate it. I really do.
And if you after you have an opportunity to dialogue with some of the members of City Council, bring them into the discussion. If you want to get back with me, I'll be more than happy to do that. And I've heard your request, and I will consider it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Then,
Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
So we had a chance to see, more than just a 30-second or 50-second soundbite on the evening news. It's rare that we get a chance to take an in-depth look at a piece of history. And believe me, 5, 10, 20 years out, people will look back at this point in time at that meeting with the mayors. And there is a full length available online. If you go to the website, occupyrichmondva.org, or on Facebook, Occupy Richmond, the one that has nearly 9,000, as opposed to the one that has 156, which is the faux page. And you can find the full-length hour, the entire meeting, which covered a whole range of subjects beyond the focus of this edited video. And the focus of this edited video is going to be the subject of our immediate conversation here with my guests tonight. I have with us, go ahead and introduce yourself, guys.
Hi, I'm Vivek Jain.
And Mark Wood.
Mark Wood, and I'm Alan Chincius, for those of you who are new to the cable channel. Clearly, we've got action heading towards City Council. The mayor pointed us in that direction, not that we didn't already have some sense that really was the playing field. There was an opportunity for him to, step up to the plate and show a little bit of leadership or vision. He chose to kind of stand back a little bit and steer us and point us in the right way and say that he would consider support once he knew what was being proposed. Well, the time has come, because Monday night at City Council, there's going to be a resolution, an ordinance introduced at City Council. It'll be the first hearing on it, put it on the table, and 2 weeks out will be the first time they're capable of voting on it. It has to be held over. Any legislation automatically gets held over. Yeah, the short version of that legislation is that, and it's being proposed by Marty Jewell, is that Kanawha Plaza downtown will turn into a free speech zone, 24-hour a day. Everybody and anybody, come whoever you are, and let the marketplace of ideas and the value of your vision and the quality of your speech draw people to you or turn you off. It'll be an opportunity for Richmond's City Council to step up to the plate and say, it's time for a change, and free speech is a very important issue. And so I'm hoping that we can have a little conversation with my guests here on immediate strategies and what needs to happen to make that a successful and approved change in our legislation.
And I would just like to add that it's unlikely that Mr. Jewell's resolution will be limited to just Occupy Richmond.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyone who is interested in having the freedom to express his or her beliefs, dissent, protest, whether it's the Tea Party or Occupy Richmond or any other ideology or cause. It's very important that everyone support and actually be there, present at the City Council meeting.
Right.
For the past several meetings, both the Tea Party and Occupy Richmond have come out in force. Between 30 people, I think, from the Tea Party, and at least 60 to 80 consistently from Occupy Richmond. So it's very important that everyone come out.
I think the concerns, the legislation as I've seen it, addresses all the concerns for fair and equal treatment or disparate treatment. It's a wide open ordinance. Everybody and anybody is eligible to take advantage of the right to free speech. If they want to do it during daylight hours, so be it. If you want to do it on a 24-hour basis, so be it. It really opens up the playing field on an equal and fair footing for every single person, group, organization who has a cause. And there are those who are going to say, well, what if the neo-Nazis want to, or what if the Ku Klux Klan want to? Well, David Ball, a local attorney, defended cross-burning right up to the Supreme Court as an expression of free speech. Bobby Scott, our congressman, voted against legislation that would have banned the burning of the American flag. And he went to the VFW convention the next day after his vote, and he stood up and he said, yes, I did it, and here's why. In my family, there's a military tradition. We've gone and defended the United States against all enemies, to protect our freedoms and our rights. And as vile and reprehensible as I think the burning of the American flag is, I think there's a more important issue, and that is freedom of speech trumps even the most vile speech. And we have to protect even those who make us want to throw up with their speech.
Bobby Scott said all this.
Yeah,
at the VFW.
And they turned out, with amazing applause and support for his position.
Wow.
Even though they themselves, as an organization, wanted the legislation originally to be passed. So free speech is, to me, one of the absolute core of what makes us different from other places on the planet.
And we talk a lot in this country about honoring the Constitution and how important it is for us. And one of the best ways we can do this, and I'm echoing the comments that have been made so far, is to come out in support of this amendment so that everyone has the right to exercise that First Amendment right to freedom of public assembly and to getting together to express your views about a wide range of subjects, whatever is on your mind. This is essential to democracy, and I think the more people that come out in support of this, the better off everyone will be as a result.
So we will be getting the actual ordinance online on the website, www.occupyrichmondva.org, and on the Occupy Richmond Facebook page.
Yeah,
correct.
So the actual ordinance will be up hopefully by Monday. It'll be introduced at City Council, which is at 6 o'clock at Council Chambers, second floor City Hall, this coming Monday. 2 weeks out, there will be the first opportunity to vote on it. So if you're at all fired up about free speech for whatever your cause, whether it be for Occupy, Tea Party, or anybody else, if you think that this is an important issue, one thing you can do is show up at the council meeting, and there'll be plenty of opportunity to express, your opinions and your support for or against. But get a chance, as soon as we're able to get it posted at the website, to actually read the ordinance. Come out if you can. If you can't, the other thing that needs to happen is we need to let our city
Communicate to the city council members, let them know, send them emails, write them letters. We've got 2 weeks to do this.
phone call.
And phone calls, and let them know your feelings about this amendment.
Okay. The thing in terms of city council contact, we'll be right with you, caller, is you can get contact both the council office phone numbers and all of their email addresses at richmondgov.com, and the mayor.
Right.
I would like to see the mayor step up now that this ordinance is proposed.
And be
take a
supportive.
look at it and be supportive about it. But we have a chance to
Yeah.
show these cities that are doing violence and brutality and pepper spray and flash grenades and putting people in the hospital a civil way,
Including veterans.
Yeah.
including veterans.
Let me add to just real quickly that people talk in terms of the costs of providing facilities for people to gather together and speak. But we should keep in mind that we spend millions of dollars on all kinds of things, including, of course, sending troops out all over the world, in fact, billions of dollars. So it seems to me that honoring that First Amendment, which is so important for preserving and enriching our democracy, that setting aside some amount of money to ensure that everyone has that right and can exercise it fully is, in a sense, the least we can do to honor that First Amendment. So I look forward actually to City Council coming out in full strength for this amendment, and the mayor in particular to stand up and speak out as a child of the civil rights movement, somebody who was involved in the civil rights movement. He knows firsthand how important it is to be able to have a space to make voices heard. So I look forward to all of those persons
Yeah, I'm
standing
looking
up.
forward to it. It's a civic pageant, making change in positive ways through legislative changes rather than burning down, trashing, and smashing. Welcome to the show, caller. What's your thoughts tonight?
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call. My point is, while I agree with what the folks are doing around the country and right here in Richmond in terms of fighting the bailouts and for the big corporation and the banks and whatnot, I agree with that. I just don't see what this Occupy movement, sit-ins, whatever you like to call it, can do to change anything. I mean, business goes on as usual. It's like they're not paying attention, and there's no reason for them to pay attention to kids, well, mainly young folks out there sitting in certain areas, parks, whatever. I just don't see where it can change anything. I don't mean to be so pessimistic. I think the folks out there are somewhat naive. It's not like you're fighting to change a law or something. You're fighting to change the way, I guess, business is run, I'm assuming. So I just don't see where it would change. As long as folks are making money, they could just ignore you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your call. He makes a commonly made point, and it's absolutely understandable to me, because the list of things that need to be addressed is so enormous. The change that has already happened is that there is now a conversation on this global list of things that need to be changed. The income disparity of half of the American population losing ground in the last 30 years, and the top 5% going up 300%. When are we going to start talking about this and stop hiding from it? Stop, oh, well, there's nothing anybody can do about it. If enough people say, this has got to be dealt with, mark my words, it's going to get people's attention. It will begin by changing the conversation. The national media, which is corporate owned, have already shifted. They have no choice but to cover this.
Right.
And even though they slant it a certain way and try and distort or twist it to their agenda, they're forced to cover it because it has become an enormous story.
And I think along those lines, I think people my age, between 20 and 35, we've really grown up in an educational system that really disempowers us and miseducates us about public power.
How
and
did you turn out
change.
so good?
Well, I mean, I think I think the way that we learn history, the way that we learn about change, the way that or the parts of the civil rights movements and the social movements, which have really brought so many progressive achievements for workers, for people of the community, have really been forgotten or de-emphasized. And so I think we have to keep in mind that this is only week 5 of Occupy Richmond. It's about the second month of the Occupy Wall Street movement. And I think we have to keep in mind the time scale on which change actually happens. If we remember that Rosa Parks was arrested in December of 1955, well, the Civil and Voting Rights Acts and bills didn't come until a decade later. And at that time, you didn't have the trillions and trillions of dollars at play.
You just had a lot of hard hearts.
Right.
Correct. And so we're talking about, I'm sorry, Mark, we're talking about a global movement that is political, but it's also moral, it's also environmental, it's also social and cultural. And there's a lot of education that needs to happen. And actually, Dr. Wood and I and many others are taking a very active role in putting on forums, teach-ins, and other educational forums so that people can have this dialogue and learn about social movements.
So what is your response to the
Well, I think
callers?
it's a great question. I mean, I think it's a question I also hear many places. And it seems to me that part of the process we're in right now is figuring out answers to those questions. And it begins with, as we already have, making visible some of the conditions of life that people have suffered that have been largely made invisible or kept invisible by the mainstream media. So we have stories coming to the surface, more attention to the suffering that people are experiencing around a whole range of issues, as Dr. Jane described. And out of that is a broad democratic discussion of, all right, what are we going to do in response? And it's not a simple project. I think it's very much, again, in process. Some of it may be legislative, but I think that the scope is larger than that, to really begin to think about alternative economic systems, systems that put people before maximization of profit, systems that take seriously the need for restoring and replenishing the earth on which we all depend. All of those things are at work in this discussion, and how to proceed to create that other way of living, that other economic system is very much underway at this point in time. And as you point out, it's going to take some time, I think, for us to build the sort of foundations, educationally, politically, socially, that would allow us to rebuild society, build something new that we haven't seen before.
And I think even before we can talk about alternative systems, whether it's economic or political possibilities, one of the big barriers is understanding what kind of system do we live in. We hear a lot about democracy, we hear a lot about capitalism.
Free enterprise.
Free enterprise, but we rarely ever hear the term human rights, unless it's being spoken about or by the State Department about some repressive regime in some third world
country. Yeah.
Right.
And so I think it's awakening to the fact that the third worldization of America has begun and has been actually going on for several decades. That in fact, our society, as much as we proclaim and profess our values and principles, has really failed to meet human needs and human security and human rights.
The shift I've seen from when I was your age to now, you know, and I'm not that old, you know, I mean 30 years. And the difference in, when I came out of college, there were jobs. There were jobs that paid reasonable, and you know, for starters, almost anybody could get a reasonable paying job. And you know, now it's just like I look at the graduates from college and I think, what's their future? Their future is maybe being an adjunct professor and making less than a McDonald's manager
with
makes,
no health care benefits,
with no health care benefits, side benefits, and
a lot of loans,
and you know, and for that you got to keep on going and go even deeper in debt and get a doctorate, or you know. And I'm thinking something has gone vastly wrong. I'd like to come back to the college question, because that in essence was the perfect beginning for the conversation. What Occupy has already done has created a conversation. It's as if, you know, we've put feet and fire together.
And faces.
And faces. And we've added a whole lot of kindling under that fire on the feet. And if need be, you know, we light the fuse on some dynamite in the big log jam. That no longer will we allow inaction, disregard, hiding from the truth, fact-free, you know, legislation and posturing by political parties of both aisles. You know, and enough is enough is enough.
And I think we're in the middle of what might be called a kind of delegitimation of the existing institutions. There's a growing recognition that whether Democrat or Republican, neither party serves interest other than the wealthiest 1%.
Correct.
And it makes little difference with regard to war, with regard to responding in a progressive way, in a responsible way, to environmental conditions, to social conditions. Both parties are, in essence, I would say, the parties of Wall Street, and war. War is a tremendously wealth-generating project for
and
wealth
draining.
And wealth draining for the rest of us. And I think that recognition has become, again, more pervasive for people. And out of that comes then the question, what can we do instead? We know if we vote Democrat or Republican, we end up with very much the same policies. The outsourcing of jobs continues, a race to the bottom to reduce wages to the lowest possible level. And getting rid of all sorts of benefits for people. That continues apace.
Including unemployment.
Unemployment benefits.
Because those people are what's draining our national treasure and causing all of the viewers to their tax dollars to have their blood just sucked out of them. It's all those people who want to get unemployment. as opposed to tax loopholes and the massive write-offs and the no taxes paid
Yeah.
by corporations that are paying salaries that are beyond obscene
Yeah.
to their CEOs for failure to do anything other
Right.
than generate enough money to pay themselves.
To enrich themselves.
To enrich themselves.
That's
And-
right.
and
That's
it-
exactly right.
It boggles the mind to
Yeah.
think that this kind of stuff we've been on this course, on this trajectory, and we all, on some level, know it, but it took a threshold of pain across the population sufficient to awaken the outrage.
Yeah.
And the I've had it, enough is enough.
That's right.
And if it means, and who knows where Occupy will end up going. Each group, each local unit has its own agenda and discerning process, but there seems to be some consensus items kind of arriving independently from many of the groups, and it focuses primarily like locally, getting free speech
Right.
firmly set in legislation that allows everybody and anybody. That's a given. That's an immediate goal. But long range, to get the corrosive effect of corporate money and influence on our political system with both parties, as soon as they take their hand down from saying, I do solemnly swear, it goes on the cash register, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching,
Right.
ka-ching, endlessly. And then the worst of it all is that most of them go in there moderately wealthy, and when they leave, they go into this lobbying ultra wealth. Newt Gingrich, for a few hours of his time,
For Fannie
Right.
Mae.
for a few
Right.
hours of his consulting time, paid $1.8 million.
Right. Or Barack Obama, who's the bulk of, or at least the largest contributor to Barack Obama's campaign, 2008, and may well be again this time, is Wall Street investors, with Goldman Sachs leading the way. So here's a person who promises real change and yet is in the pocket of Wall Street. And I don't see any simple way out of that conundrum, because we're counting on the same people who are in the pockets of the 1% and are members of the 1% to vote against being beholden to those interests and serving
Well,
themselves. It's
the only possibility, there's two possibilities I see. One is that they finally get it. And despite all of the
Right.
past behavior, they finally step up and say, this never was right, here's my vote. That's the fire under the feet.
Right, with enough public pressure.
With enough public pressure. That's the fire under the feet that Occupy has the opportunity to present on a wide range of issues, to force them no other recourse than to do the people's will, finally. The other thing is that if they don't, there's recall processes which vary from state to state. It's a state's right issue. Each state has a right to set their own election laws and processes. But then there's the replacement. If the outrage and the extent of it is sufficient, you only pass 50%. But when you start getting 60, 70, 80% on an issue and you're voting in the opposite column, the chances of you getting reelected, doesn't matter how fast you ka-ching, 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 there's not enough money to buy your seat if that people are that pissed off. And that caller is what I see, the value and the power of Occupy as a movement.
And I think restating, the two-party paradigm has failed.
Right?
And in fact, now we can consider alternatives and ideas which had previously been taken off the table.
Because they were bought and sold.
or
Correct.
never put on the table.
Or never put on the table.
Never even saw the light of day.
And so it's really an opportunity to begin to address all of these crises that we face in a serious way. And as Dr. Wood said, what's been tried, the neoliberalism, the privatization and commodification and deregulation, that's all been discredited.
Or should be.
And should be.
I mean, look,
Still being hooted by, that's the factory politician.
We've had 40 years of lowering taxes on the rich, 40 years of lowering taxes on the rich, of deregulation, and those two policies have led to the situation we find ourselves here in the United States. I think your description of it
Most
is...
perilous disaster that's faced humanity.
And the only time that we've had a significant growth in the middle class in this country was actually when tax rates were at the very highest.
And union membership was high as
union-
well.
And union
And
membership
we're
was
talking
high.
about Eisenhower era.
Right, yep, 1950s and 60s. And then always a war waged against that effort as well.
Right.
And so if you care about the power of the citizen of this country, if you care about the power of the worker in this country, which has been diminished thanks to these rollbacks in civil rights and social rights and all of the progressive achievements of the last century, if you care about that, then please consider Occupy Wall Street.
Right.
Because
Occupy Richmond, Occupy,
and
Occupy
Richmond.
your neighborhood. There's more than one Occupy movement in Richmond. There's Occupy Richmond, which is a citywide, and we have one in Blackwell area, Occupy the Hood, Richmond, RVA. One of the things, again, coming back to the caller, is that it's not just started the conversation, what can Occupy do, but it's driving the agenda.
Right, increasing.
I mean, you talked about things that never even made it onto the agenda
Yeah.
for discussion. Legislation that wasn't even
Considered.
proposed because
Right.
it's unthinkable. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
But it tells you how far we've come. If you look at the Declaration of Independence, it says explicitly that governments were formed for the securing of the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Those are human rights. And then Dr. King also talked about the right to a job. But, I mean, that was what government was for. We can't say that we have government of the people, for the people, and by the people. As Mary Lease, I believe, said in 1890, we have government of Wall Street, by Wall Street, and for Wall Street.
It also says that it's the right of the people, actually the duty of the people, to replace these institutions if they no longer serve that function.
Correct.
And I think that's where we're at this point, is that we really have to look at creating alternative institutions. And I think that's another strategy, going back to the caller's question, and that is to begin to talk about holding what some people have called people's congresses. So that communities begin to meet, as we already are through the Occupy movement and associated movements, and begin to have statewide and then finally national congresses, and to build, in fact, alternative institutions.
And also
and eventually, I think, shift away. I mean, we well could see a kind of revolutionary change that happens by establishing those other
revolutionary
institutions.
or evolutionary. I mean,
Or, yeah.
You know, the reality is that I don't know anybody who hasn't been whacked in some way by the collapse and the deterioration and the conditions.
Right.
You know, the effects that it's had on you, caller, you know, and listeners.
Yeah.
It's all different, but we've all been, you know, some people, their families and their lives have literally become roadkill.
Yeah.
You know, done nothing wrong except live and act and be a good citizen and a good family and take care of your kids and be responsible, have a job, pay your taxes, pay your property taxes, keep your house up, and roadkill, gone. You know, off the face of the earth. Families, you know, broken up,
Yeah.
disintegrated.
I
There was a
mean,
man,
healthcare bills that are
I was working at a customer,
Putting people
and
in
she got a
debt.
phone call from a friend of hers. 40 years he had worked for this national corporation, middle upper management. They called him to the lunchroom on a Friday afternoon, bought him a cup of coffee, and told him to go to Human Resources and pick up his last check and the cardboard boxes to pack his office.
yeah.
Wow.
That's what it's come to.
Right.
Welcome to the show, caller.
Hello. Thank you. Were there any demands being set forth by the Occupy Richmond movement or the Occupy movement itself?
Sure, we can
Good
talk about that.
question.
Thank you. I think at this point in where we are in Occupy Richmond, we're really focusing on the principles and values, and that is, it is a very human rights and human needs and human security and human dignity based movement, whether it's in Seattle or New York or here in Richmond. And I think that's a pretty good place to start, because it first of all reintroduces this idea of what human rights are. Secondly, I think it points out this very idea of our being interdependent. Alan just finished mentioning that there was this focus on the individual family unit. And I think one of the great points of Occupy Wall Street, and the reason that it is global, is that people are realizing that these illusions of nationalism or localism are really hurting us, and that because of our integrated world economy, because we are so interdependent, whether or not people are dying, farmers are dying in India, or people are suffering from a variety of problems in Africa or in Southwest Virginia.
Or
That-
in slave barracks in China to make our computer parts.
Well,
Correct. That we're all connected, and I think these conversations are really important to have and to debate over before we begin to make lists of demands.
I was going to add, too, as an example of that the nationalism and the sort of idea that we should only be focused on repairing our situation here, I think forgets the global nature of the economic world.
And relations, right?
And relationships. And so this effort that we hear from our politicians to make America competitive again, we should keep in mind that competitive again can only mean, from the perspective of investors, that the wages of workers in the United States have been reduced to something like what you might find in Indonesia or China or El Salvador. So when we hear President Obama and others talking about making America competitive again, inevitably that has to mean a reduction of conditions of life and working conditions for people here. I think as soon as we begin to recognize that that's what that project really means, with various kinds of trade agreements, that ensure that corporations can move the jobs offshore. In fact, the person in charge of Obama's Jobs Commission, one of his first acts was to move a whole bunch of jobs to China as part of his work as CEO of General Electric. And so this is the person who's responsible for creating jobs, but of course not jobs here in the United States. That condition is not going to go away until we begin to build, I think, and I'm risking a sort of policy statement here, some sort of international labor standards, that we have some international workers' rights that are recognized all around the world, and basic conditions of wages and benefits, and we can talk about all those sorts of things. But unless that's the case, we are going to continue to be involved in this race to the bottom.
And being able to enforce those human rights, just as we do trade agreements with the GATT or any of the other international treaty organizations.
Right.
And I think it's very important that everyone understand that our politicians don't get it. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a Trans-Pacific Free Trade Agreement that was passed. That was Obama's doing. And if Obama or Congress had actually cared about the workers or the working conditions or what's actually being produced, or even, the livelihoods of people in China or in Korea or in South America, they wouldn't have passed this trade agreement. And so I think it's very important that we take these policies very seriously.
And I think, again, here we're still involved in demystifying many ideologies. So this trade agreement is pushed forward under the auspices of being a free trade agreement, free market agreement. And of course, we see lots of people in this country who are supportive. What we need is more free market. But as long as this is what free market means, corporate, another word for corporate domination, actually, we are all going to find our own wages and conditions of life being diminished as time goes on.
I never thought I would credit Ross Perot for talking about the giant sucking sound.
Right.
Yeah.
As he was talking about NAFTA and what its impact would be on what life would be like in the U.S. or what jobs might be available. But on that one point, he was actually right.
Gosh, there's so much.
There's so much.
There is so much. That first caller it just keeps echoing in my mind, because I think for a lot of people, I was amazed this afternoon. I did a hospice visit over on Northside at Manor Care, and the nurse who came in to test the blood pressure on the guy that I visit with, I hadn't seen him a lot lately because I had been so tied up with Occupy, and she said, "Occupy, what's that?" And I thought to myself, wow, there's still somebody whose life has been so full. Who knows why?
Right.
She might not be able to afford cable. She might be working 3 jobs and have a family and just doesn't have time. And so I know that there's people out there that this is maybe the first time they've heard anything more than a quick flash or something that you tune out on the TV and
I think this really gets into as well one of the major challenges, I think, for the movement both here in Richmond and at other sites is to broaden the reach so that more of those people who are so busy and so alienated in many respects.
Overloaded.
Simply overloaded, overworked, underpaid, that they are involved in this process as well, that they get a chance to learn more about what this is about and participate in it.
So what are the things that are happening locally that would allow people who perhaps are watching tonight to say, you know, I want to know more about this, you know, and
Right.
how can they tune in or make contact?
question.
What do we have available to take out into the community?
Sure, you mean from Occupy
From
Richmond
Occupy
itself?
Richmond, yeah.
Well, certainly everyone is welcome to visit the General Assemblies, which are happening now on Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays at Boone Farm until we relocate. And also on Sundays, we are going to be holding General Assemblies out at various locations in the community. That was intended so that people from the community who would be interested would be able to participate and actually learn about Occupy firsthand. Secondly, we're also developing a list of resources, reading materials. We're hosting teach-in forums at VCU. That doesn't have to be specifically located at VCU as we continue to develop our associations with other local universities, for example, VUU or VSU. Or U of R.
Maybe, right, exactly.
And so I think those will be some things to look out for. We'll
Right.
certainly announce them on the OccupyRichmondVA.org website and the Facebook as well.
And we also have a growing number of churches in the city, religious organizations that are interested in holding general assemblies, so that will be posted as well. Workshops, general assemblies. I think there's a real recognition of the need to, again, grow the movement outward and to extend in some of those communities. Again, I think you described very accurately, that are so busy, very much in need of being a part of this, but so busy they don't have time. So there's various ways in which we are reaching out at this point.
So we have a General Assembly scheduled this Sunday, I believe?
General Assembly this Sunday.
At 5 o'clock, I believe, yes.
Yeah.
And where is that going to be?
I do not know what the location will be, but
Yeah,
we'll have
I
to
think-
check the website.
Right. We'll have to check. We'll have to
Okay,
double check.
so
I think the thing is to stay tuned to the, again, if you have Facebook access, internet access, to go to the Facebook page for Occupy Richmond.
That's
There's-
facebook.com/Occupy Richmond without any spaces or hyphens or anything.
And the educational team does a great job of keeping everybody up to date on exactly what's happening there. So it's very easy. And it's important in so many different ways. I think one is that, and I've said quite a bit about this to friends, that the Occupy movement has really brought back, I think, what you could call a sort of Greek idea of democracy. What was sometimes called the agora, where people would gather together and talk in a public setting about issues that matter to them. And together in that setting, develop ideas about how to address their shared concerns. We have that now happening again. You know, we read in our history books quite often about our ideas about democracy starting in ancient classical Greece. You know, sort of the place where it was all born. And in fact, I think what we're seeing right now is it being reborn all across the United States, where citizens from every walk of life can come together. So it's a great experience to have, really. I mean, everyone should at least go out and have a chance to be a part of the GA, share your own views, raise your own questions, and help shape the movement. I think that's really a big part of it.
And come meet people from the community whom you probably wouldn't have met otherwise in your work or social life. That's been one of the things that I've been most happy about, is you get to see kids and older people and students and people from all over Richmond. And it's really a wonderful, wonderful way of meeting and bouncing ideas off each other.
Yeah.
And really questioning assumptions and knowledge that you might have about the world.
Yeah.
You'll be very impressed by the high level of knowledge that people have.
Yeah.
The act of reading.
And concern.
And concern.
Deep concern. We have something coming up this weekend at the Unitarian Church.
I think it's going to be a couple weeks away, but definitely there will be at the Unitarian Universalist Church on Blanton Road. We'll have some things scheduled there near Dogwood Dell. That's where the church is located, and there'll be events coming up there as well.
So if people are out there and they belong to a church in North Side or South Side, and you know they want to invite Occupy Richmond, is that a possibility?
I mean, we can't speak, I don't think, for the movement, but
No.
but certainly,
Labor unions, neighborhood organizations.
and I think
They want to invite somebody to come out and do a teach-in.
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
provide-
anyone can sign up. Anyone can like the facebook.com/Occupy Richmond page.
And for the old
certainly-
school, the Stone Age folks like me, all you gotta do is go to Google and put in Occupy Richmond, and it's gonna show you right where to go.
Right.
The
Right.
website and the
Yeah.
Facebook. If you don't have Facebook, the website will do you just as well. It has contact us in there. You can find out the most recently posted upcoming events.
You can post a question yourself. You can say, my group would like to host your General Assembly.
Right.
When would be a good time?
Or
Yeah.
we'd like a teaching, an educational forum, come out and help us out.
And we're certainly, we're part of a group of faculty at VCU that are very happy to come out and give a presentation on a wide range of issues related to the Occupy movement.
Correct.
So if you're interested in that, you can also send an email to myself at mdwood@vcu.edu, and we'll be happy to put something together for your organization.
Well, we've got just a couple minutes left here, and I want to come back to where we started, which was the video with the mayor and the movement to City Council this coming Monday night at 6 o'clock at City Hall. Marty Jewell is putting an ordinance on the table for being introduced, and the soonest they'll be able to vote on it is 2 weeks out. The nutshell of it is that he's proposing that Canal Plaza downtown be changed from, the typical park with all of the restrictions of sunset and no encampment and fees and permits into basically a wide open free speech zone where all the impediments that block access to that space for the purposes of free speech are removed. It's a pretty comprehensive and thorough approach, fair, equitable, open to any and all. It addresses all the concerns that I've heard so far, and if more come up along the way, they should be factored in because we need to make this as perfect as possible. Please be part of that process. Come down to City Hall on Monday night, City Council meeting, and again in 2 weeks when the vote is coming up. Or go to richmondgov.com for the phone numbers and email addresses for the mayor and your city council and let them know that free speech is really important to you.
And democracy.
And democracy.
Yeah.
I want to thank you guys for coming out tonight.
Yeah,
it was
thanks
a
so
pleasure
much.
having
Thank
the
you, Alan.
conversation.
Yeah, it was
Some
great.
Great points covered. And for those of you watching at home, glad you were with us. And for those who will see us on the web when we post this broadcast for y'all to review,
Thank you,
welcome
Alan.
to If I Had a Hammer, and we'll be back on the air next Friday night, 7:30 p.m. Comcast and Verizon.
Pastoral care that I see, and I appeal to that because one of my idols, Christ, was a man who dealt with a person's temporal needs initially. He just simply cared about the person rather than their issues, and I think that, as I said before, as we continue to dialogue and meet and discuss these certain issues, for us to find a better way to dissolve those barriers that prevent us from working together cohesively, that prevent us from actually taking instruction and guidance. Because I have no problem other than the fact that it seems to me, and I was detained by the Richmond Police Department, held without bond, for simply peaceably assembling with my brothers and sisters, not tooting my horn while walking around the camp, reminding the officers and ourselves that we are a non-violent, non-resistant movement, and we will comply in every way, because I believe this compliance allows us not only the opportunity to express that we can obey the law, but we can also be a law within ourselves and also work within the boundaries of it. So that's the strength, I think, that as an individual member of our